Okay, welcome everyone to the second installation of EFP Informs. Today's topic is all about education and school openings during COVID-19. Just as a general matter, we hope that we can continue this new hyper-focused webinar series, into the future and even after, some of the current events that are kind of engulfing our communities. Before I introduce our guests, I'd like to just mention a few things about the structure of our webinar. In particular, we've disabled a few features for all of our attendees just for security reasons. Notably, we have disabled all of your ability to unmute yourselves and share your video. So if you've tried to test that out already, don't worry, there's nothing wrong on your end. That is a feature that we have disabled on our end. Additionally, we have restricted, again, for security reasons, all of your ability to chat. And so other attendees will not be able to see exactly what you are chatting. We may have a few polls throughout the webinar, depending on where the conversation leads us. Throughout the discussion, if you think of any questions that you'd like answered by any of our panelists, whether they be relating to the poll or something that came up in a discussion, please feel free to submit your questions to the Q&A box, not the chat. That is the Q&A box, not the chat. I'm sure we will get many questions. And so we likely won't be able to get to all of them, but we'll do our best. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce someone who's had a big impact on my life, and I'm sure a big impact on all of your lives. He's done a lot for the community. The Executive Director for the Economic Forecast Project, Dr. Peter Rupert.
Hey, Charlie, thanks. So this new format, the EFP Informs, is trying to get, very local understanding what's happening in our community. And I think I speak for all of us when I say, our hearts go out to all those who've been affected by the pandemic and the events over the recent week or so. So we're very lucky to have two guests who are super important in this area that we're going to talk about today. I'm sure most of you know them. Laura Capps, President of the School Board for Santa Barbara Unified School District. Laura is back in town after a while in DC, where she was a speechwriter for Bill Clinton and worked as the communications director for Senator Ted Kennedy. We're lucky to have Laura back. And David Marshall, Executive Vice Chancellor. I know him better as Professor of English and Comparative Literature myself, but he's the Executive Vice Chancellor at UC Santa Barbara. And if you get a chance to go to the English Department of English website, David has a book I like a lot called Forgetting Fathers, which is a beautiful book, and I recommend it to everybody. So before we begin, I'd like to talk just a little bit about some recent events that have occurred, and share my screen for a second. So this morning, initial claims came out, weekly initial claims. And as you can see that during the last few weeks, we've seen declines in the initial claims. And as people have been registering for weekly unemployment benefits, initial claims are when you first become unemployed, you must decide to apply for unemployment insurance. And this thing has been coming down step by step, as you can see. At the peak, it was about 6.9 million people filing in a week. Now we're down to about 1.8, 1.9 million people. So we see how this has been progressing. And what this means is, that probably a lot of people who were initially unemployed were those people who could easily be removed from their jobs, for example, in restaurants, et cetera. And now people are still filing. But people are starting to go back to work a little bit. And as people are starting to go back to work, we kind of like to get a sense of those individuals here in our community, how you're responding to some of this opening compared to what it was a couple of weeks ago. So we're going to run a little poll. The first poll is really basically what we did last time, but now things have started to open a little bit. And if you need to, you can move the poll off of the screen. You can just slide it to the side, and as I continue with this, with these initial claims. The second thing are called continued claims, and you can see continued claims basically had been rising. And what are continued claims? These are people who've had at least one week of unemployment insurance, and they're continuing to stay on in the unemployment rolls. We reached a peak of almost 25 million people, came down substantially in May, but now you can see it's popped up a little bit. So those are things that we we want to keep track of. I will mention that measuring these things is very difficult, and a report came out today again saying economists are just pretty much mismeasuring these things because of all the changes we've been seeing in various government programs. So this is going to continue to be a problem. The next thing I want to do is mention that this is from Cottage Health. This is their dashboard. And the dashboard basically presents some results of what's been happening lately. And probably the important ones here are basically, the hospital is, it does have, still has plenty of room in case anything happens. They track that. From May 2018 to May 24, probably it's better to see here, you can see that they sampled 1,400 people. Of those 1,400 people, 35 positive results. And the week between May 25th and May 31st, they sampled to 1,700 people and only 15 positive results. So those are very encouraging results from the health side of things. And I encourage you, we're going to put the links up here on the chat box so that you can go to this website and take a look at what's been happening. So as I mentioned with the unemployment data, there's going to be lots of information coming out, and some of it we'll talk about today. Many of you might have seen some of these articles. For example, the LA Times had a bunch of pediatricians saying that kids should be back in school despite the coronavirus risk. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Other people have said, this is from the Wall Street Journal, pandemic sent 1.5 billion children home from school. Many might not return. And here basically it shows that many students are not logging into their online classes for perhaps many reasons, and we'll go into that a little bit. And finally, another Wall Street Journal article, is it safe to reopen schools? These countries say yes. And many countries have opened schools, and they have found that very little, if there's been no remarkable increase in the virus infections. Now, having said that, let me also say that none of these results say that we should necessarily open our schools. These things from other countries have had very different processes in terms of locating the virus. Some have been with contact tracing, et cetera. So it's very important that we still remain very vigilant and take some of these studies a little bit with a grain of salt, because these didn't happen here yet. And the way we've reacted are very different. And so this just shows you what, before we get into our talk, this is kids going to school in China. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen. And those ideas basically are come from the idea that somehow we have to maintain the vigilance that we've been having across the board. So Now to get started, I'd like to ask, each of our guests, David and Laura, what's been happening so far? What have you been doing so far? Where are we? How are things going up till now? So Laura?
Thanks, Peter. Well, I just want to acknowledge that today is actually the first day of summer in our school district. It doesn't really feel like it because kids are probably still on the screens that they were on yesterday while parents are working. And so, I mean, I just want to say, in addition to dealing with COVID and the racial unrest and everything, parents, here in our community and across the country it's been really tough to work and teach and have kids at home. And that struggle has been really stressful. So, and here we are with summer with camps closed. So it's not like there's any let up. And so I just want to acknowledge what a challenging time and stressful time it's been. That being said, I mean, I'm incredibly proud of what our school district has done. It's not been easy. There was no planning, if there had been sort of a 2-month ramp up like we do have now. And that's a really important piece. We do have 2 months in the summer, but we didn't have that March 13th. And it's just showed, if anything, this pandemic, how interconnected we all are, incredibly interconnected, the way that we breathe the same air, but also the way that our schools, which I say, are the heart of our community, the cornerstone of our democracy. And this question, thanks for bringing us together to have this conversation, because the question of how to reopen really is so central to everything. It's central to how do we reopen the economy. People can't go to work necessarily if they're 4-year-olds at home or they're 11-year-olds, et cetera. So we've been doing what we can as a district. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of our teachers who've been having to transition without any prep time to an online environment. I'm really proud, we can talk more about it, but in economic terms, so many of our families in this county are suffering financially, and school is a source of food for their kids. And, we have the second highest poverty rate in the entire state here in this county. And so the fact that our school districts have kept those doors open in terms of delivering food, having food ready to go, has been a logistical struggle, but really important. And we've done in the Santa Barbara district, about 32,000 meals. So all in all, things have gone as well as could be, I would say, if I had to sum it up. But now we have a bit of a break with summer to really do even better for the future.
Peter, do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, sure, David.
So I would echo the comments that Laura made, and I'm really glad to have this opportunity to be here. And I've been to so many economic forecast project events, so I know how important it is to have these dialogues with the community. So, if we had gone to our faculty and staff and students at UC Santa Barbara, sometime last fall and said, hey, we want to convert the entire university to a remote environment, and we're going to give you a year to do it, people would have said, that's absurd, that's ridiculous, we could never do that even in 2 years. Well, we did it in 2 weeks, and it is kind of miraculous that we managed to get everything up and running as much as we did. And it has taken amazing efforts on everybody's part, not only technologically, but also just drawing upon everybody's expertise and dedication and commitment. But that being said, it's been a challenge to deliver a UC quality education. I think we've done a really good job at doing it, but we are concerned about reaching all of our students. We have 40% of our students are first generation college students. And we made an effort before students left to make sure they had Chromebooks and were able to connect. But people have different challenges in terms of whether they're able to connect technologically, and it's so important that they also are able to connect, socially and educationally, and to have that experience of a UC education. And now with some of the horrible events going on around the country, we're particularly aware of the difficulty of maintaining a sense of community when everybody is remote and spread out around the state and even in some cases the world. So, so as Laura said, I'm really proud of what everybody has done, but it's certainly not business as usual. And now we are also trying to plan for the future to see how we can do an even better job in the fall, and how we can deal with all the logistical challenges we have to be able to, in some way, shape, or form, bring people back to campus.
Right. So David, going forward on that, so I'm sure you've had lots of conversations, or thousands of them probably, with many across the UC, with UCOP, et cetera. Do you have a good sense of where they are, or where we are in terms of what it means to open and when, and what that will look like?
Yeah, well, it is an advantage to be part of the University of California system. So there are a lot of dialogues and collaborations going on. So we're all talking to each other. We're all talking to the UC Office of the President and to the state officials. But we also are very much in touch with our local partners, and all the universities really are answerable to the county officials, particularly the public health ones. So it's very important to us that we have this strong groundwork, this strong relationship with County of Santa Barbara, City of Santa Barbara, City of Goleta, and all of our partners here, and Cottage Hospital as well, I would underline. So we're all basically in the same situation of trying to figure out how we could get back to operations on campus. Right now, the state is still in the stage 2 of the governor's California Resilience Roadmap. I think we're still on the first part of stage 2, and officially higher education is in stage 3. So campus activities are really limited to essential services. So we're aware that in order to be able to move forward, that there are a whole series of criteria and conditions that we need to establish. So we have to have robust testing capabilities, and I could tell you more about that later, but all the campuses are working to develop that. Contact tracing capabilities, which fortunately the county will be able to take responsibility for. Of course, mandatory face coverings, physical distancing. We're looking at what our capacity would be for classrooms and what the new protocols would be for increased cleaning. And even if we are able to bring students and faculty and staff back on campus, we know that it's going to be with some kind of reduced density to reduce the number of contacts. So we're working very hard on this on campus. The chancellor has convened a chancellor's COVID-19 response working group. He personally chairs and convenes this meeting now 5 days a week. For a while, we were doing it 7 days a week. And we have all of our vice chancellors, our academic senate, our scientific and medical professionals, health professionals, and we're all working with our partners to come up with a very careful, planned, calculated return to activities if we're allowed to do so.
Right. So, I mean, the educational system has very, very different needs, and so so Laura, in your realm, there's some very important issues that I have been reading about, which is, for example, you mentioned the food delivery,
Mm-hmm.
but there's another issue that people are saying that up to 10% of people who were supposed to be taking online classes are not really logging in and doing that, and a lot of it stems from sort of maybe lower income. They don't have the facilities to log in. Have you dealt with any of that, or have you felt that?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, I should say it's really our teachers who take the responsibility to be in touch with every student and to decipher if they're not logging in and what's the issue there. And working with Cox, we really, in my view, should have free Wi-Fi for low-income families. Just an obvious, and there is a program, but it only lasts 2 months, and it's pretty hard to navigate the bureaucracy in order to get it. You have to prove that you have free and reduced lunch, et cetera. I just think if I could wave a wand, we would just have free Wi-Fi for our students. And I really hope that that's something that we can work more with Cox to do, because that's just going forward. We know, I mean, we're planning for all scenarios. We're planning for full planning for reopening. We're planning, but the linchpin is the technology and being able to connect students. We feel that as though we've done a good job in the last month or so. At first it was a little rocky, and it was about 10%, if not more. But now there's a higher level of confidence of being in touch with each and every student and making sure that they have the iPads. They already had the iPads, thankfully. It was just really that Wi-Fi connection that is just critical going forward. And it's not as though, say we have miraculously some, we have a vaccine and we go back to normal, no one expects that anytime soon. But this is a new era of education in elementary and secondary where technology is going to be used more. And I see the opportunity that's there, that, this outmoded model of a teacher standing in front of a row of desks, sort of teaching to the middle. We're now learning much faster than we had to before how to do personalized learning using technology, and that Wi-Fi is the key piece. So I'm really hoping that our community can do even more to make sure that that free and reduced kids who have free and reduced lunch, and low-income kids also, in addition to getting the food from the schools, we also have the Wi-Fi connection. It's just that
right. So we have another poll now. This is for those individuals who have kids in schools. But I want to push you a little bit more on that, Laura, just for a second.
Sure.
Many people believe, when we look at the cognitive versus non-cognitive learning, that social interaction between the kids, and getting that one-on-one education. If a student is in the classroom doing something, that the teacher can come over and say, no, that's not the way to do it. So how is that affecting your thoughts about social interaction?
Oh, it's paramount. I mean, I'm a mom to a 9-year-old. I get it. I mean, it's the emotional side of learning and the connectivity and the way in which you motivate students, the way you support them emotionally. I mean, you can never replace that with a Zoom or with technology. It's just ideally a supplement. It's an augment, so that kids are potentially learning through technology in addition to that face-to-face interaction. And that's the goal. No one wants this to be the way of the future. I'm just saying that we have to utilize technology better. And this is catapulting us forward to be able to do it. And teachers are learning skills that some didn't have before in order to do this. But the social and emotional piece of it is extremely important. We have hotlines, we have counselors who are reaching out and doing Zoom. We have, dropping off I've heard of a counselor who, dropped off an extra pair of headphones to one of their students who was struggling to get the work done because couldn't hear in a crowded apartment. So, those human interactions are just invaluable, and we have to maintain those. I think we've done a good job, but that's the real challenge. And teachers, I'm hearing from teachers too, they miss seeing their kids. It's not just a one way where the students miss teachers. They want to get back in the classroom. I mean, they want to do it safely, but that's why they're teachers. They love kids by and large.
So as far as we know, I mean, you're set to open August 18th, I believe. David has a little more time to think about it. I mean, we're not opening till October 1st or something, David. I forget what the exact date is. So how are you dealing with that with foreign students? I mean, knowing that the visa offices are closed.
Right. So we've already reached out to all of our incoming freshmen. In particular, the international students, because we knew that they may have trouble getting visas and getting here in time, to say that we would provide remote instruction for them if they can't get to campus. So we want it to be possible for students to enroll even if they can't get to campus. So, we're planning to have a mix of in-person and remote instruction, but given the social distancing requirements and realities of the situation we'll be living with, we know we're going to have a lot of remote instruction, particularly for the large lecture courses like kind you teach in the economics department. So,
Right.
so we're really just trying to figure out what's the balance we can have. To what extent can we have a kind of hybrid approach where a course could have some online lectures and some in-person component. So there also will be some students, as there will be with faculty and staff, who don't feel that it would be safe to go into the classroom because of age or some pre-existing medical condition. So we're really trying to plan for all the different contingencies.
Right. Yeah. So I mentioned to David yesterday, I think hazmat suits for all professors would be good. We could have uniforms and different colors for different departments, maybe. Because I'm sure a lot of people, are feeling sort of scared to go back. How about on your side, Laura? How about the teachers? I guess at UCSB, correct me if I'm wrong, David, a quarter or something, or over the age of 65 professors.
For our latter faculty, I think it's about 23% who are 65 or older. And if you look, there's another set of lecturers we have. I think it's around 11%. So there are a fair number of faculty who are in that age group where they might be nervous.
Right.
So, we're trying to take all that into account.
Is that a constraint?
Well, for sure. I mean, we certainly have some older teachers, but what really is a constraint is so many of our teachers have school-age children, and my heart goes out to them, because it's one thing for me to be on my laptop writing a memo while my son is homeschooling. It's another thing to be teaching a class of 30 kids, 38-year-olds, right? It's super challenging. And here, they have that challenge at home, but then here we say, oh, but it's safe, let's go back to school. They need to feel that, because if they go back to school, potentially, infecting themselves and then their families. It's just it's challenging all around. One tangible thing to focus on with a hybrid model of continued distance learning and time at home is for our staff to have childcare. I know that there's been some efforts around the county to have childcare for essential workers. Well, teachers are in my view, at the top of the list of essential workers. And so I know our district leadership right now is in conversations about if we do have, and it looks like, some sort of distance learning and children at home, how do the children of the teachers and staff, how can they be cared for, in what facilities? A great offer from the West Side Boys and Girls Club. Michael Baker reached out to me and said, hey, our Boys and Girls Clubs are empty during the days, right? During the school days. Great
Right.
facilities with kitchens. So that kind of community spirit is live and well here in Santa Barbara, thankfully. And we just need to put all those thousands of pieces together in this, what is really a logistical challenge, and one that no one really planned for. This is not like you went to school when you got your credential to be an administrator in a school district, to plan for distance learning and to plan for a pandemic.
And this is one of the areas where we're really interdependent, because when I talk to faculty and staff and say, well, we'd like to have this mix of in-person and remote instruction, and figure out how we could do that. One of the first things they say is, well, I've got kids at home, and they might be still at home, or they might be only in school for some days. So all of our faculty and staff have kids in the school system. So that's one of the things where we depend on the great public schools in Santa Barbara to prepare future University of California students. But right now we're definitely dependent on them to be able to provide that education.
Right. So, when I was in school, it was a little bit of a hippie time, so we had a lot of our classes outdoors under trees, which is pretty nice. But so Laura, what can you say to the parents about, why they should send their kids back to school on August 18th? What is it that you you've done so far and are planning to do to, to make it safe for the children and faculty.
Sure. Well, I'm going to try to share this this document that we're working off of. Here we go. Let's see if I did it right.
It looks like, yes.
Okay, good. It's just some parameters of the fundamental considerations. Let's see. I don't see it, so I'm just gonna keep talking and see. Is this the one about, it's not the food one, is it?
That's the food one.
Oh, whoops. Here, I blew it.
There it is.
There we go. So, these are just all of the buckets of considerations, and certainly, first of all, we're taking input now. I should stop with it. And similar to the poll that you're doing currently right now, the staff and teachers have all been surveyed and talked with, and of course the teachers unions are in constant conversation. So input is vital. So input is vital. And the second piece of that, a survey went out to all parents of the Santa Barbara Unified School District. We're up to about, I think, 4,000 participants so far. So if you think about it from a scientific, it's a great sample, and we hope to get to more. And we'll have the results of the survey at our school board meeting on Tuesday. So I want to hear from parents. Our board wants to hear from parents. I've been getting so many interesting articles and studies. A pediatrician parent and I were just texting all day long today. We want to hear. This is, like I said, uncharted territory. And so if you have opinion about it, first of all, the survey exists, but we want to hear from you. And then if you're reading about what other schools are doing, whether it be in Europe or in San Diego, we do want to hear. We're in that mode of taking this in. We're like I said originally, we're kind of planning for all scenarios right now. And it looks as though we'll have a few different models of a few different schedules to float, to preview in a few weeks. But, I know about dealing in crisis, not this kind of crisis I've never dealt before, but you have to be flexible. And you can't just say, oh, we're going to decide on July 1st what it's going to look like on August 18th. It could change. We could get another wave. The reopening that's happened kind of recently, these protests that happened, that could we could see a spike, or we could see it continue to go down a little bit, which would be wonderful and very encouraging. So we're just going to have to see how it goes. And certainly some parents are not going to feel comfortable sending their children back to school, no matter if all of these steps are taken. And some parents are urging us to open them now, and we're urging us to open them in May. So the input right now is valuable.
So where do people go if they want to, express their feelings about these things? I mean, other than just going to the school board meeting, I mean, where else?
Sure.
What other resources are there?
My email, our emails are all on the website, but it's lcats@sbunified.org. I love hearing from parents. I love hearing from anybody related to schools. And we read these emails. Our school board meeting is Tuesday, and it's on Zoom at 6:30. And the majority of the conversation will be exactly about this, with a little more information, because we'll have that survey back. We'll have that parent survey back.
So speaking of surveys, Charlie, did you get the results from the survey, the school one? Okay. Let's see. How much do you agree or disagree with the statement? As of right now, I feel comfortable with my children attending school. 22% agree. 37% somewhat agree. And 17%, strongly disagree. So yeah, so certainly those are the things that, you'll need to talk about, obviously, with the parents and let them know. And again, I really encourage all the parents to write to Laura. I mean, why not? Express those concerns. It's super important. So I'm not sure what your poll is going to say. It's to a much larger audience, Laura, but this might be somewhat indicative that people are still a little bit hesitant.
Sure.
And and a lot of it's probably due to thinking about we could see a second wave if we're not if we don't stay vigilant. Thanks, Charlie.
If I can make a point on testing, I just hope by August 18th that testing has improved. It's been such a challenge that, you know, ideally if your child has symptoms and, you know, you get a test, but the fact that there's such a huge accuracy discrepancy, you know, what is it roughly? I think it's up to like 30% inaccurate. So some people are walking around with a sense of false confidence, or I worry about that piece a lot, because I think that the testing is so critical, both the antibody test, which would be fantastic, but also the COVID test itself is, I hope in this county we can improve even more on the types of testing that we have. I'm glad that more people are getting tested, and that's certainly way more available than it was even a month ago. But the quality of the testing that we have access to, I hope improves in the next few weeks.
I should mention that our scientists are working on a new test that they have approval for in the research phase. It's not in a clinical phase, but we've started testing people on campus in this kind of pilot phase. And, you know, there are others working on comparable technologies around the country, of course. But if this is successful, it could have an impact way beyond our campus, because it's not a nasal swab, it's using saliva. It costs about $4 or $5 instead of $40, and is a lot quicker. And so we're really hoping that, you know, this will prove to be successful, and that, you know, everybody can have access to more widespread testing, because that's a key component of whatever strategies we pursue. Because although you can never completely eliminate the risk, if you can minimize the risk and make it, you know, acceptable, then that, you know, gives you a lot more options in terms of what you can do.
Oh no, that's right. Testing is going to be just is crucial to all of this. There's just no doubt about it. And there's a couple other things, you know. This is a little bit, you know, of my own thing, but so moving forward, you know, David, right now the SATs aren't working, and so many schools are saying we're not going to have the SATs anymore. And secondly, you know, what professors worry about a lot is, you know, cheating, to be honest, on exams. So, you know, if all of a sudden we're going to switch to a whole new way to evaluate students, you know, we're not using SATs, for example. If people are online, you know, are we getting the accurate picture, you know, of what they're doing? You know, so what are you thinking about on that side of things?
Well, before this pandemic, the University of California was conducting its own study on the use of the SAT and other standardized tests, and there was an academic senate working group system-wide that wrote a report on this, because there are concerns about bias and these types of tests towards, you know, various socioeconomic groups. So the conclusion of that report was, I think, you know, going to be that we should phase it out and develop our own kind of test. But this has accelerated that change. So it looks like that, not just because of the COVID, but that we really will be trying to move to a different mode sooner than we thought. So that raises a lot of questions for admissions, because, you know, at UC Santa Barbara, you know, we've got close to 100,000 applications. And, you know, whereas the Ivy League can have this sort of, you know, minute evaluation of, you know, letters of recommendation and, you know, how many clubs you were in, you know, we do a comprehensive review. We don't just look at scores, but it's a lot more challenging. So our admissions folks will have, you know, a lot of challenges in trying to think about, you know, how to assess the applications. The online testing, you know, with final exams, is very challenging, as you and your colleagues know. There are some vendors who provide online proctoring of exams, but they're imperfect, and, you know, in some ways there's some controversies around them. I think that, you know, they provide a very good service within a certain, you know, confined conditions. But some of our students, you know, are out there taking exams at the kitchen table in a small apartment, and they're supposed to certify that they're alone in a room for 3.5 hours. So this is one of the big challenges that we haven't completely been able to solve. But our instructional development teaching experts are working with faculty to develop other modes of assessment, to think about other types of quizzes or assignments that could be used. But if this continues for a while, that's going to be one of those challenges that we have. So we're spending a lot of time talking about testing, both COVID testing and assessment testing of academic achievement, and aptitude testing. So I hope somebody can come up with one test that could, scholarly aptitude and whether you have COVID-19.
Okay, so we're going to open up to some questions now. Charlie, you want to put up the poll about State Street, about people going out, while I turn this over to Travis, who will be talking about, he'll be asking some questions from our attendees. Okay, so 52% still, if they open tomorrow, would feel comfortable. So only half the people feel still comfortable, even if all the guidelines are being met. And I think this just goes to show that, this is super uncertain times, and, anything that businesses can do, to make sure that everyone's comfortable, is going to be the key. And Charlie, the other one on, if people have already gone there yet. Anyway, Travis, oh, there we go.
Should be able to just scroll down.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Travis, are you there?
Oh, yep. All right.
Okay.
So ready for some questions. Due to the nature of this format, the questions might sort of ping pong all over the place. So bear with me. I'll try to keep them sort of streamlined, but it's probably not going to work out. First one is from Scott Pipkin. Is there any data available about virtual attendance rates for the K through 12 schools across the Santa Barbara County? I assume this is probably more directed to Laura.
Yeah, no, the short answer is no. I think that it was case by case in terms of taking attendance, and some classes didn't meet. It was up to each teacher how to engage with their classes. The suggestion was for each teacher to be in touch with their students on a daily basis. But in terms of class, like a bell going off every morning with attendance taken, that wasn't part of the sort of rushed planning that happened this spring. But it's a good question. The connectivity is really the way we measured, and like Peter spoke of, at one point we were missing about 10%, and that has closed to some degree. I mean, the school just finished, but we made a lot of improvements, but that certainly was the biggest challenge, if not a biggest challenge.
I sort of piggyback, I was just reminded about this in the chat. Aaron Muslera asked, where can Sbusd parents find the survey, I think, that you guys were doing? Do you have a location for them?
It went out on Parents Square, and I'll so if you should be on Parents Square, it would be in your email. But if not, I'll make sure it's either on our website, or if you can't find it on our website, you can ping me at lcaps@SB Unified, and I'll make sure you get the survey.
Nicole Keel has a couple questions about the UCSB situation. First of all, do we know what the IV situation is like with students moving out? I know there were some concerns expressed in different areas that people from out of town are going to kind of come move in to IV, and the problems that might happen, and if there were any data on the number of UCSB students that have tested positive for COVID. I don't know if David's heard anything about that, or Peter.
I don't have that exact information, but we've been very fortunate, and we haven't had incidents of students on campus. I think there are 1 or 2 students who, back in their homes in other parts of California, were diagnosed, but we've really not had cases of our students here. I mean, right now, I think maybe about 10% of our students stayed in the residence halls, students who didn't have anywhere else to go or couldn't leave the country or whatever, so relatively few students. We don't have good information about who is in Isla Vista, and of course there are City College students there, there are other students. We hope that students or others are not coming from outside the community, because it really is important to have lower density there. But that's one reason, as we calculate whether we can bring students back to campus, we think that if they're on campus and we have them in our residence halls at some reduced capacity, that we can maintain a safer environment for them with our testing protocols and other regimes that we would have.
And just to follow up on that a little bit for both David and Laura, I mean, yeah, we were talking about teachers and faculty, but there's a lot of staff at both places, and so how are the staff feeling, and what is it that you're doing to protect the staff as well?
Well, as part of our, planning process for the fall, if we're able to, proceed and we have all these other, safety measures and protocols in place, we will try to bring some staff back, but we will assume that others will continue to work remotely. Some might work in shifts or in alternating days. There might be areas where we have to reconfigure office furniture to make sure that people are not too close together. So, it will depend a lot. And of course, that childcare, homeschooling issue that we mentioned is important for staff. So, it will certainly not be business as usual, but, we're hoping that, by the fall, that we'd be able to, at least in some capacity, bring back those who, where it was appropriate to bring them back.
But there is some childcare. I mean, it must be overrun by now, right? The childcare services at UCSB.
Well, they've been closed following the, state and county guidelines. And now that we've moved into a different phase, they're working on a reopening plan. They have to reconfigure the way that they interact with the students in terms of how many teachers and cohorts of students and smaller groups. So they're in the middle of trying to come up with that. But of course, we don't have the capacity for, childcare for all of our faculty, staff, and students. It's just a portion. So we're also dependent on what happens in the rest of Santa Barbara.
Sure.
Okay, an anonymous attendee asks the following. The K-12 schools are often some of the few resources available that support disabled or special needs children and students. What are the rates, or given that the earlier question we didn't quite know about the rates, but what are the rates of logging onto special education for special education students onto these remote platforms in Santa Barbara? Or also, I guess, what are some of the solutions that are being done to help that segment of the population?
It's such a good question because special ed has been at the top of everyone's mind and concern. This has been such a challenge, and I can tell you that Dr. Fran Wagenek, who is our assistant superintendent for services, student services, who oversees this, it's something she brings up all the time. It really just, we don't have rates, doing as best as we can, and each teacher is in touch with their students. I mean, there's a better ratio between students, special ed students, and their teachers, and so it's really been up to the creativity of those teachers to work with their students remotely. It's such a challenge, so I'm really pleased that the question was raised. But daily, for sure, daily is the minimum. That has to be, that's the requirement, and that's what's been met. There's speech counseling, there's all these other services, and so the gist of the question is really a good one to recognize just what an integral part that our schools play in people's lives.
Okay. Hang on, Travis. I just had one quick question I wanted to ask David, because I forgot to ask it before, but again, one of the attendees asked it. Is there a timeline when the UC system is going to make a decision on, is it going to be it's certainly going to be hybrid, but would they ever come up with a situation like it's fully reopened and adding hybrid? Is that something in the works?
Well, I think all the UC campuses are aiming to be able to convey more information in the next couple of weeks. And again, it depends on, what we're allowed to do by state and county agencies. But, we are now working with departments. Departments have given the deans curriculum plans and instructional plans for what that mix will be of remote and in-person. And then we're sort of mapping that out onto our classroom inventory to see, what we can do. But, as I said before, like every other university in the country, except for a few that have just said, oh, we're just going back to, things the way they were before, but I think that's a minority. We will have a lot of remote instruction, but, there also will be students who will be doing remote instruction on campus. So we're really trying to build in as much in-person experience as we can for those students who will be here. So we won't necessarily announce, whether your course will be online, but we'll be able to have the general plan. But it's somewhere within those parameters.
So as I got it. So a really hard question, and I'm sorry if this is too hard. It's a mean question, but we've talked a lot about increasing services to those who need them, et cetera. We're just about to get into some massive budget cuts across the state, across the school districts. So while we're thinking about all these extra things we need to do to help the students during this time, how is this going to pencil out?
Yeah, we're really worried about that. And I have to say that I feel, I've spent a lot of time in emergency planning over the past few months, and people are anxious. People want certainty. They want to know what's going to happen. And here we are trying to make plans for whether it's, 3 weeks from now or 3 months from now, when we don't know what the facts on the ground are going to be. And we're in the exact same position with the budget that we are with COVID-19, where we just don't know, whether things will be, better or worse. And, moments like this, I tend to say, the situation's somewhere between the apocalypse and not as bad as it looks. And
I see.
and, with the budget, we're very, very worried. I mean, we're looking at, over $1 billion in losses in the University of California. And if you combine the loss in revenue in the residence halls and the hospitals and auxiliary units with the extra expenses that we've all had to incur, with the expected loss of revenue if we get less in tuition because of enrollment questions, and then with a reduction in state support, which could be as much as 15%, it looks like, then we could really have very big problems in the fall. At the same time, when our students come back, I don't want to tell them, hey, you're not going to be able to get those classes that you need to graduate after everything you've been through. So, we're again doing contingency planning, but it's difficult to know what the parameters will be. And of course, we're all in the same boat together in terms of California's investment in public education, and the same is true with K through 12.
Laura, in the K through 12 area?
It's tough. 10% cut. We're being required to do more with less. I mean, questions about cleaning and who's going to take the thermometer, the temperatures every day, and how are we going to make sure that the cleaning supplies and all of these things are in addition to already strapped environments. So I'm just going to make a pitch. I mean, I mentioned poverty rate, but we also have a lot of wealth and generosity in this community. Now's the time to be supporting our schools and supporting our institutions of public education. Santa Barbara Education Foundation, even if you don't have kids in the system, or if you do, this is the time. This will be what it goes towards, to making sure that in this crazy environment that we can still teach our kids the way we want to teach them.
And, I would add that we know how important education is in California, and it's what made the state, what it is. And I really sense that the recovery that we're all hoping will happen quickly depends on this investment in public education. And for the research university, for the public research university, there are some obvious areas where, medicine and science and technology are going to be key to our surviving this. But all the other areas too, how we're going to renew our social contracts, how we're going to, understand the public policy issues, the ethical questions that we've had to deal with. We really need, public education and the research that we contribute. So, and by the way, the University of California is the third largest employer in the state. And, so far we made a very difficult economic decision not to lay workers off during this academic year, partly out of a sense of responsibility to our workers, our employees, and to the state. So we really hope that the state will recognize that a renewed investment in public education, starting with preschool but going through the research university, is just going to be crucial to our future, to getting out of this horrible predicament that we're in.
That's right. So Travis, I took over your job. Sorry, but you can.
It's all right.
We have time for one or two more questions.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, you asked a pretty hard question earlier. I'm going to see if I can do the same. This is, I think, mostly towards David. Unfortunately, sorry. But I mean, for sure, the school, University of California system, and UCSB specifically, is like between a rock and a hard place for sure. But a lot of people have been discussing partial tuition remission for students because the service they're getting is I guess different than what normally it would be. And so an anonymous attendee asked, what's the decision behind charging students full tuition? Is there any sort of stuff behind the scenes that you could perhaps share with us about decisions being made on that front?
Well, we know this was, a controversial decision. Was made ultimately by the Office of the President, and the regents, of course, were involved in this too. And, I understand that it's kind of counterintuitive, but first of all, we are doing our best to provide a quality University of California education, even if it's somewhat different what we expected. But tuition doesn't just go towards some particular expenses at a particular moment. I mean, I just mentioned our effort not to lay off our employees. I mean, tuition goes towards salaries that are fixed. Tuition goes towards the financing on our classrooms and other buildings. So there are a lot of fixed costs which are there that go into creating the education, whether it's remote or in person. So that was why I believe that that decision was made.
Okay, and I guess some last questions.
Last
there
one.
are a couple. There are a couple that are very similar, so I'm going to try see if I can put them together and make them the same sort of question. Nicholas Thatcher and some anonymous people have asked about a lot of teachers around the nation, public, non-public schools, K through 12, college, are expressing desire to leave the vocation, not because they are uncomfortable with distance learning, but because there's no more face-to-face contact with students, which is something that may have persuaded them to get into the profession in the first place. Should we be worried about losing professors or losing teachers?
Teachers.
Laura, do you want to answer first?
Sure. Yeah, I sure hope not. I think if you've been watching SGN with John Krasinski, I mean, I think around the world, people now respect the profession as they should have been this entire time. I mean, now that parents are being asked to do it at home with their children and spending this much time, I hope that they feel the love and the respect and the value that teachers have in this community. And I hope that we will get through this. This is not a permanent scenario, thankfully, hopefully. And I believe that the recognition of the role that teachers play is at an all-time apex because of this experience that we've been going through. And hopefully, if I could wave a wand, their salaries would be commensurate with that respect.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And, I do think there's some professors who were sure that they'd be able to retire before they were forced to teach a course online. And now they're really kind of wishing they had retired. But the reason why this is difficult is because they miss their students. And So I think that so many of them just want to get back to have that experience, and they've been so compassionate with their students and so concerned about them and reaching out to them. So, as Laura said, we have to believe there's a future here, and it does make us value what we've missed and what we've lost even more.
Right. I think, that's a good point. I think that, Laura, you said it earlier, I mean, the online part is really supplemental. And, I can tell you that while there are some negative things to online, now because of the sheer, number of all the resources available online, I think my students, certainly my graduate students, I think they're getting a better education. I mean, we're able to converse a lot, but during a class, for example, I can extend it by 45 minutes and somebody else is on a topic giving a webinar in Germany that, I wanted them to see, and bam, they can just see that right off the bat. So I think it's actually opened up a lot of channels that we've never had in the past. But again, I don't think it's a replacement. I do think it's a supplement. So anyway, I want to be respectful of time. So I want to thank Laura and David very much, and thank all our attendees. We'll have this put up on our UCSB Economic Forecast Project site. There'll be a video of it and all the links and resources. And Laura, I think, hopefully will share some of those resources for us, and David, where people can go to get more information or to provide some help as needed. So again, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And thank all the attendees for coming.
Thanks, everybody.